I will start by talking about the regulation, its history and development. There is still some confusion as to when Part 11 applies, so I will talk about its scope. I will then discuss the FDA's Compliance Policy Guide and the FDA Industry Guide on using computers for clinical trials. This guide uses some elements of Part 11. Release of Part 11 was no surprise to the industry. As a matter of fact, the industry asked for such a regulation to be able to get rid of paper documents. And the rule has a long history. An advance notice of proposed rulemaking was published as early as 1992. The proposed rule was published in 1994. At that point, the industry had time to give comments to the proposed rule, and there were more than 100 of them. The FDA took these comments very seriously and responded to all of them. So when you look at the rule, you will see it's more than 30 pages long and printed with a very small type. However, only 3 or 4 of these pages actually refer to the rule itself. The other 90% of the document includes a long preamble with industry comments. The FDA did a good job of communicating their interpretation of the rule early on. It was especially Paul Motis who contributed papers and discussions to many conferences. The FDA also trains the industry with 2 interactive video conference sessions. Nevertheless, the industry was disappointed to some extent, because they asked for a rule on electronic signatures, and what they finally got was a lot of requirements on electronic records. In the meanwhile, we have seen 483s and warning letters with reference to Part 11. Part 11 is not popular with some laboratories because of additional workload. However, as the FDA still accepts paper documents, these labs believe that they can continue with paper documents and at the same time use computers to make paper printouts, but do not have to archive electronic records. Unfortunately, they are wrong. Part 11 basically has 2 parts, signature and records. Signatures can be handwritten, but records must be kept electronically when 3 criteria apply. Number 1, the work is planned to be submitted for the FDA. Number 2, computers are used either to create, modify, maintain, archive, retrieve or transmit data. Number 3, records are saved on a durable storage device. Practically, number 2 and 3 apply to all modern analytical work. Computers are used in almost 100% of all analytical work, and the data is saved on a durable device, at least at some point in time. So in practice, we have no choice. If we work in an FDA-regulated environment, and if we use computers to create, modify, transmit or archive records, then Part 11 applies. Part 11 applies for new systems and for legacy systems. It also does not differentiate between purchased computer systems and systems that have been developed in your own company. Part 11 applies to all records that have to be submitted to the FDA, regardless of whether they include a signature or just a record. There have been and there are still a lot of questions about the interpretation and implementation of Part 11. There is uncertainty not only in the industry but also with the FDA inspectors. Therefore, the FDA plans to come out with a series of compliance policy guides. The first one has been released already. It answers part of the questions. For example, it makes a clear statement that legacy systems are not exempt. Legacy systems are those which have been in place before Part 11 was released. They will have to comply with Part 11. Administrative controls should be implemented immediately. One comment was that it should not take a year to develop a statement on the meaning of electronic signatures. But it has been realized that some of the requirements cannot be implemented today or tomorrow because software may not be available, and frequently it is not possible to develop or get it in a short time. So it is stated that these technical controls may take a little bit longer. The question is, how long can they take? The only answer I heard from an FDA official was that it should not take 5 years, which does not mean that it can take 4 years. On the other hand, there are also some technical controls where the guide does not allow any compromise. These are data security and data integrity. The guide also makes a statement that enforcement should be handled on a case-by-case basis. I will mention some of the criteria when discussing inspection and enforcement practices later in this presentation. By the way, the guide can be downloaded from the internet. The FDA also publishes industry guidance documents for specific applications. For example, there is a guidance document on using computerized systems for clinical trials. It was released in May 1999. In this guide, the FDA uses the ideas of Part 11 and gives some more details. It also shows how the FDA interprets certain aspects of Part 11. I would expect that this guidance document will be used as an inspection guideline for other applications as well. In general, guides are more specific. For example, it is stated that the user's name of a person who is currently responsible for a specific computer system or for a specific application is displayed on the computer screen.